Tendencies.com. Know Thyself, a practical guide to self-awareness and self-regulation. Welcome to this Hypercognition tutorial video. By now, you should have already answered the tendencies survey and discovered your tendencies bar chart. It would help also if you've already read your tendencies report. If you've not done this already, we suggest you pause this video now and do it, so that this tutorial will make more sense to you. This tutorial is approximately 20 minutes long and there are 4 sections. In section 1, we will discuss why understanding and managing your tendencies is beneficial and establish some definitions of what we mean by self-awareness, self-regulation, and hypercognition. In section 2, we will give you a brief history of personality psychology and a high-level overview of the 3 main personality theories in the world today: DISC, MBTI, and the Big Five. In section 3, we will introduce you to the tendencies model, which ties together these 3 main theories into one simple model that is easy to understand and apply. Then, in section 4, we will discuss the practical application of hypercognition for individuals and families, companies and teams, and schools and colleges. So let us start with why tendencies. Never in the history of the world has self-awareness been as important as it is today, because until today, we did not have any competition. We now live in a world of big data, artificial intelligence, and social media algorithms, and if we are not self-aware, we run the risk that the large tech companies whose motives are driven by their advertisers will know us better than we know ourselves. Therefore, an increased ability to understand and manage our tendencies is an essential skill in the 21st century. We call it hypercognition. Self-awareness is defined as conscious awareness of one's own personality tendencies, character traits, and emotional states in relation to others. Self-regulation is the ability to intentionally manage one's own personality tendencies, character traits, and emotional states in relation to others. Metacognition means thinking about thinking or knowing about knowing, or in other words, being aware of the nature of the voice inside your head and how your mind works. We define hypercognition as heightened self-awareness combined with intentional self-regulation in order to act and interact more consciously in the world. The tendencies model is a simple 5-step process that provides a set of tools at each stage, starting with self-reflection, followed by self-discovery, followed by self-awareness, followed by self-regulation and self-actualization, which together, with the help of this video tutorial, will help you understand and apply hypercognition. Humans have been fascinated by the subject of personality and self-awareness for thousands of years because of an innate desire to understand ourselves and those around us better. From the ancient Chinese, who around 4,000 years ago used the elements of water, wood, fire, earth, and metal to predict a person's personality, fortune, and fate, to Greek philosophers such as Hippocrates, often referred to as the father of medicine, who in around 432 BC hypothesized that we have 4 fluids in us that affect our temperament. He called them choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic, and if you read the ancient literature on this subject, there is a correlation to how modern-day psychologists describe the subject of personality. Including this gentleman here, Carl Jung, the father of modern-day personality psychology, whose work forms the basis of most of the personality theories and assessments today. Much of this theory has been supported by 21st century neurobiological research, which suggests that certain parts of the human brain are responsible for certain cognitive functions. However, the link between the brain and personality is not yet fully understood, and it is an ongoing field of research. Therefore, everything that we present in this video is just that, a theory, and it is also why we chose the word tendencies, because that is exactly what we're dealing with here. Tendencies, not absolutes. We will now give you a high-level overview of the 3 main personality theories that are used today: DISC, MBTI, and the Big Five. DISC is a behavioral assessment tool developed in the 1920s by a gentleman named William Moulton Marsden. He was also known for inventing the polygraph lie detector, as well as being the creator of the Wonder Woman comic series. In 1956, Walter Vernon Clark developed the DISC theory into a behavioral assessment tool, and to this day, it is used as the basis for a number of behavioral assessments, particularly those that involve 4 quadrants or colours. In DISC, D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for steadiness, and C stands for conscientiousness. The meaning of these words will be explained later in the tendencies model section. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, is a personality assessment developed by Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers that produces 16 types. They were a mother and daughter team, and they started developing their model around 1917. The assessment gained popularity during World War II as a means for determining suitable career paths for women during the war. The model is based on the work of Carl Jung and employs 4 dichotomies or opposing tendencies: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. Again, the meaning of these words will be made clear in the tendencies model section. And finally, the third of the main theories is known as the Big Five, or the 5-factor model. The model was defined by several sets of independent researchers and initially advanced by academics Ernest Toops and Raymond Crystal in 1961. To this day, it is still the most widely used and well-regarded personality model in academia. The model uses the acronym OCEAN, which stands for openness, the tendency to be open to experience; conscientiousness, the tendency to be organized; extroversion, the tendency to socialize and engage; agreeableness, the tendency to be cooperative; and neuroticism, the tendency to be sensitive to emotion. People score higher or lower on these scales, and again, the meaning of these words will be made clear in the tendencies model section. For those of you interested in a deeper dive into any of these theories, there are plenty of resources available on the internet. What we are attempting to do here is provide a high-level overview of the theories and show you how they correlate in a simple and concise model that is easy to understand and apply. So let's move on to the tendencies model. The tendencies model is designed to help people develop hypercognition. In this section, we will discuss the different aspects of diversity, brain lateralization theory, and finally, the tendencies model. We use the iceberg metaphor to help people understand the various aspects of diversity. The top of the iceberg represents appearance, which is a visible diversity aspect, that which you can see. Just below the waterline is personality, which is a semi-visible diversity aspect. You can kind of see it. Further down and less visible are individual aspects, and right below is character, which is the least visible yet most important aspect of diversity. A person's character is only revealed over time. Appearance includes diversity aspects such as gender, race, age, skin color, etc. In other words, your looks. Personality aspects include your thinking style, your communication style, your natural strengths and default behaviors. In other words, your tendencies. Individual aspects include your life experiences, your family background, your education, career, interests, skills, and your learnt behaviors. In other words, your capabilities. And character aspects include your ambitions, your self-awareness and your ability to self-regulate, your ethics, morals, values, and beliefs, and these guide your intentions. I think you will agree that a person's value lies more in their capabilities and intentions than their looks and their personality. However, due to heuristics, that is, shortcuts of the mind, we often judge people based on their appearance and personality rather than understanding them and knowing them based on their experiences and character. And when we do this, we often misjudge people's capabilities and intentions based on their looks and their tendencies. Greek philosophers advise us, know thyself and be temperate, for the unexamined life is not worth living. By heightening self-awareness and improving self-regulation, we hope that the hypercognition model will help you understand yourself and others on a deeper level so as to live a more examined life. At this stage of the model, take note that our tendencies are related to our personality, whereas our intentions are related to our character. We believe Martin Luther King understood this concept very well indeed, when he said, "I look to a day when people will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character." The next part of the model requires a basic understanding of brain lateralization theory. Studies have shown that the left and right hemispheres of the brain are largely responsible for certain cognitive functions. These functions are not mutually exclusive, and there is a bunch of fibers that connect the left and right sides of the brain called the corpus callosum, enabling most cognitive functions to use a combination of left and right brain activity. But generally speaking, scientists agree that the left hemisphere is associated with rational thinking, narrow-focused attention, language, reason, etc., whereas the right hemisphere is associated with intuitive thinking, broader focused attention, creativity, relationships, metaphor, and body language. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. Fortunately, we possess both. As we move on to the tendencies model, let us hold brain lateralization theory in mind. In particular, note that the left hemisphere of the brain is associated with a more independent thinking style, whereas the right hemisphere is associated with a more interconnected thinking style. There are two personality styles that are more independent in nature. The first is what we call the driver. This is the part of your personality that enables you to take action and get things done. Why is it independent? Because it is often quickest to get things done on your own. The other personality style that is more independent in nature is what we call the checker. This is the part of your personality that helps you plan, analyze, and process information. Why is it independent? Because you don't need other people in order to plan and analyze. Anyone who has driver or checker leading tendencies tend to be more independent and task-focused in the way they act and interact in the world. On the right side of the model, there are two personality styles that are more interconnected in nature. The first is what we call the influencer. This is the part of your personality that enables you to socialize, engage, and network with other people. And finally, the supporter. This is the part of your personality that helps you listen, empathize, and help others. Anyone who has influencer or supporter leading tendencies tend to be more interconnected and people-focused in the way they act and interact in the world. All we have done is allocate a colour to represent each of the tendency groupings for ease of reference and association. Red is associated with driver tendencies, what DISC refers to as dominance. Red represents the element of fire, which is active and dynamic. Ancient Greeks referred to this temperament as choleric. Green is associated with checker tendencies, what DISC refers to as conscientiousness. Green represents the element of earth, which is intricate and detailed. Ancient Greeks referred to this temperament as melancholy. Yellow is associated with influencer tendencies, what DISC refers to as influence. Yellow represents the element of wind, which is spontaneous and free-flowing. Ancient Greeks referred to this temperament as sanguine. And finally, blue is associated with supporter tendencies, what DISC refers to as steadiness. Blue represents the element of water, and still waters run deep. Ancient Greeks referred to this temperament as phlegmatic. Anyone with red and yellow leading tendencies tend to be big-picture focused, action-oriented, and faster-paced in the way they act and interact in the world, whereas those with green and blue tendencies tend to be more detail-focused, contemplative, and steady-paced in the way they act and interact in the world. So in summary, the basic tendencies model is based on DISC theory. Now let us see how DISC correlates with MBTI. Remember, there are four dichotomies or opposing tendencies. Extroversion versus introversion. Those with yellow and red leading tendencies tend to be more extroverted, whereas those with blue and green leading tendencies tend to be more introverted. Sensing versus intuition. By sensing, we mean a sensory bias towards the physical environment, and by intuition, we mean a sensory bias towards metaphor and hidden meaning. Those with red leading tendencies tend to be more sensing, whereas those with yellow leading tendencies tend to be more intuitive. Thinking versus feeling. Those with green leading tendencies tend to be deeper thinkers, whereas those with blue leading tendencies tend to be more empathetic and sensitive to feelings. And finally, judging versus perceiving. Those with green and red leading tendencies tend to be more guarded and judgmental, whereas those with yellow and blue leading tendencies tend to be more open and perceptive. Now let us see how the Big Five theory overlays on this model. The Big Five uses the acronym OCEAN, which stands for openness. Those with blue and yellow leading tendencies tend to be more open to people and ideas, whereas those with green and red leading tendencies tend to be less open and more guarded. Conscientiousness. Those with blue and green leading tendencies tend to be more conscientious, whereas those with yellow and red leading tendencies tend to be less conscientious. Extroversion. Those with red and yellow leading tendencies tend to be more extroverted, whereas those with green and blue leading tendencies tend to be less extroverted. Agreeableness. Those with yellow leading tendencies tend to be more agreeable and cooperative, whereas those with green leading tendencies tend to be less agreeable as they tend to question more. And finally, neuroticism. This does not sound like an endearing quality, and we believe that this is badly named. We would ask you not to place a negative connotation to this word, as it is defined in this model as sensitivity to emotion, which is certainly not a bad thing. With that definition in mind, those with blue leading tendencies tend to be more sensitive to emotion, whereas those with the red leading tendencies tend to be less sensitive to emotion. And there we have it, 3 main theories on one simple model that is easy to understand and apply. Our model has been purposely simplified so as not to go too deep on theory and focus more on application. Should you wish to learn more about these models individually, there are plenty of resources online. As you will have realised by now, the tendencies model suggests we have all 4 personality styles within us, but that certain tendencies come more naturally to us than others. By completing the T survey, you will have discovered the sequence in which your 4 tendencies occur to you. In this example, the leading tendencies are red followed by yellow, and the lagging tendencies are blue followed by green. We call this your T-bar. In this model, there are 24 possible T-bar combinations. 6 with red leading tendencies, the drivers, 6 with green leading tendencies, the checkers, 6 with yellow leading tendencies, the influencers, and 6 with blue leading tendencies, the supporters. Again, it is important to remember that we have all 4 tendencies within us, and that no particular combination is better than any other. Not right, not wrong, just different. We are not attempting to label, stereotype, or pigeonhole people with this model, but rather provide a framework for gaining a more accurate understanding of yourself, as well as the similarities and differences across human behaviour. By now, we should be able to see ourselves and others we know within this framework. There are the drivers, who tend to be more focused and ambitious. Then there are the influencers, who tend to be more friendly and engaging. Then there are the supporters, who tend to be more thoughtful and caring. And then there are the checkers, who tend to be more detailed and accurate. Some of us tend to be more guarded and task-focused, whereas some of us tend to be more open and people-focused. Some of us tend to be more outgoing and extroverted, and some of us tend to be more contemplative and introverted. Our tendencies also present themselves situationally, and at times we are all drivers, we are all influencers, we are all supporters, and we are all checkers. But we all have a default position from where we pivot. So let us move on to the final section, practical applications. In this section, we will look at the practical application of hypercognition for individuals and families, for companies and teams, and for schools and colleges. Let's start with individuals and families. For individuals, the first application is self-awareness and self-regulation, getting a more accurate understanding of how your mind works and deliberately managing your tendencies. For families, improving social and emotional intelligence through understanding how the minds of others work and improving communications and interactions. Personality clashes often result in family dysfunction, and heightened awareness can help reduce misunderstandings and friction. Identifying your strengths and building upon them. Understanding the strengths of your friends and family members and drawing from them. Identifying your blind spots and mitigating them. Understanding and coaching others on their blind spots. Becoming more effective in the way you communicate by adapting your communication style. And friends and family members can become more effective in the way they communicate with you. But most of all, transcending your own ego, by realizing you are not the center of the universe and you don't always have to be right, and moving away from this assumption of I am right to asking the question, how can I know I'm right? And having friends and family members transcend their ego and moving from them thinking they are right to an appreciation that we are all different. So let us look at the strengths, blind spots, and communication styles of each of the 4 tendency groups. Our strengths are our positive tendencies, or how we act and interact on a good day. Those with red leading tendencies often describe themselves as quick to act, practical, assertive, decisive, efficient, independent, ambitious, and self-assured. Those with green leading tendencies often describe themselves as methodical, detailed, analytical, prepared, judicious, logical, persevering, and meticulous. Those with yellow leading tendencies often describe themselves as engaging, influencing, optimistic, persuasive, flexible, creative, spontaneous, and talkative. And those with blue leading tendencies often describe themselves as empathetic, thoughtful, good listeners, supportive, consistent, thorough, calm, and loyal. Take time to revisit your T-charts and identify strengths that you naturally possess so that you can build upon them. If inclined, take time to identify strengths that you do not naturally possess and deliberately try to build these strengths through personal development plans and coaching. Our blind spots are our negative tendencies or how others perceive us when we are not self-aware. Those with red leading tendencies can come across to others as impatient, insensitive, domineering, controlling, poor listeners, unemotional, aggressive, and egocentric. Those with leading green tendencies can come across to others as restrained, procrastinate, guarded, inflexible, judgmental, cynical, criticism averse, and perfectionists. Those with yellow leading tendencies can come across to others as easily distracted, impulsive, overconfident, manipulative, inconsistent, unpredictable, reactive, and overly talkative. And those with leading blue tendencies can come across as overly emotional, sensitive, reserved, self-sacrificing, stubborn, slow to decide, passive, and change resistant. Take time to revisit your T-charts and identify your blind spots that might be hampering your progress or affecting your relationships, and if inclined, take steps to mitigate these weaknesses through personal development plans and coaching. And finally, let us look at communication styles and preferences. Those with red leading tendencies tend to be direct and assertive, fast and efficient, and better at telling than listening. When communicating to them, be direct and to the point, give them the big picture, use bullet points, and lead with the what or the objective. Those with green leading tendencies tend to be detailed and precise, logical and orderly, and better at explaining than engaging. When communicating to them, be detailed and give them time to prepare and read. Be planned and structured. Describe the how or the procedure. Those with yellow leading tendencies tend to be friendly and enthusiastic, optimistic and inclusive, and better at engaging than reading. When communicating to them, be friendly and engaging back. Break the ice and listen to their ideas. Include the who or the team. And those with blue leading tendencies tend to be thoughtful and collaborative, empathetic and orderly, and better at listening than directing. When communicating to them, be calm and considerate, be patient and thorough, and explain the why, the reason. Those with red and yellow leading tendencies tend to think more about the big picture and be more faster paced in their communication, whereas those with blue or green leading tendencies tend to be detailed and more steady paced in the way they communicate. Those with left hemisphere tendencies tend to be more guarded in their communication, question first, believe later, whereas those on the right hemisphere tend to be more open in their communication style, believe first, question later. No communication style is right or wrong, better or worse. The best communicators are able to flex their communication style to match the style of the person they are communicating to. So now, let us look at some of the applications of hypercognition for companies and teams. The applications for companies and teams are broadly categorized into 6 main areas. Let's start with leadership development. No particular leading tendency or T-bar combination makes for the best leader. The best leaders have high levels of self-awareness and constantly practice self-regulation. They're able to flex their communication style to communicate effectively with others, and they constantly build upon their strengths and mitigate their blind spots. They've transcended their ego. They've shifted their perspective from thinking, I am right, to constantly asking the question, how can I know I'm right? The next area of application is talent and culture development. The tendencies model can be used to coach and develop talent, and the hypercognition philosophy can be used to create a culture where self-awareness is key and diversity of thought is embraced. Next is communication and engagement. Communicate change more effectively and minimize misunderstanding, confusion, and conflict. Sales and customer service. See improvements in sales and customer service as your colleagues begin to act and interact with heightened self-awareness and self-regulation. Hypercognition can be used to improve decision-making and risk management, leverage diversity of thought to make better decisions, and improve team communication to reduce accidents, errors, and fatalities. And finally, create a culture of inclusion and belonging by embracing all aspects of diversity, including the diversity of thought that hypercognition encourages. Let us briefly focus on practical applications of hypercognition when it comes to leadership development. As a leader, your red tendencies enable you to be directive and drive the mission. Your yellow tendencies enable you to be inspirational and paint the vision. Your green tendencies enable you to be strategic and plan the strategy. And most importantly, your blue tendencies enable you to be compassionate and uphold the values. As leaders, you need to adopt an optimistic approach, and also a cautious approach. You need to be project focused and team focused. You need to create an environment of innovation and creativity, and you need to ensure there is structure and compliance. In other words, you need to tap into all four tendencies and practice balanced leadership. This can only be done through self-awareness and self-regulation, or in other words, hypercognition. And finally, let us look at the practical applications of hypercognition for schools and colleges. Even if you are no longer at school or college, there may be some interesting insights into how we learn, and so stick around for another minute or two. We are nearly finished with this tutorial. The application for schools and colleges are also broadly categorized into 6 main areas. One is student development, equipping students with 21st century competencies such as self-awareness, self-regulation, leadership skills, communication skills, critical thinking, and decision-making skills. Second is teacher development, equipping teachers with the same 21st century skills. 3 is leadership development, helping both teachers and students understand the balanced leadership model discussed in the previous section. Number 4 is campus culture, improving communication and engagement on campus by creating a common language. 5 and 6 is learning and teaching styles, helping students understand their learning styles and how to communicate more effectively with the teachers, and helping the teachers understand their teaching styles and how to communicate more effectively with the students. For it is when this happens that we can effectively apply differentiated instruction. So let us now look at learning styles and the tendencies model. Those with red tendencies tend to learn best by doing. This is also known as kinesthetic learning. Those with yellow leading tendencies tend to learn best by seeing, talking, and interacting. This is also known as visual learning. Those with green leading tendencies tend to learn best by studying information, or in other words, through reading. And those with blue leading tendencies tend to learn best through listening, and this is also known as auditory learning. It should be noted that we all possess all 4 tendencies in us, and so we all learn in all 4 ways, but we may have an inclination or a preference as to how we learn best. Those with yellow and red leading tendencies tend to be more extrospective, meaning they naturally observe things external to their own mind. Those with blue and green leading tendencies tend to be more introspective, meaning they are more adept at observing things internal to their mind. Those with leading tendencies on the left hemisphere tend to have a more rational thinking style, whereas those with leading tendencies on the right hemisphere tend to have a more intuitive thinking style. Those with red and yellow leading tendencies tend to be big picture and fast learners, whereas those with green and blue leading tendencies tend to require more detailed information and are more thorough learners. Finally, those with green and red leading tendencies tend to prefer a structured approach to learning, whereas those with yellow and blue tendencies tend to prefer a more collaborative approach to learning. Teachers who have developed hypercognition can adapt their teaching style to the learning style of their students and provide differentiated instruction that really works. So let us end by revisiting the tendencies model journey. Abraham Maslow placed self-actualization at the top of his hierarchy of needs. What is self-actualization? The desire to become the most you can be, to live and examine life, to maximize your well-being, to fulfill your potential. We believe self-actualization occurs when you're able to align your tendencies with your intentions through heightened self-awareness and intentional self-regulation in order to act and interact more consciously in the world. We call this process hypercognition. Thank you for watching. If you would like to find out more about our workshops and coaching services, please contact us at info@tendencies.com.